Woo.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Welcome. Welcome, 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 welcome.
What's
Wow.
that sound? Do you hear that? Somebody's, you hear anything?
Yeah, I hear that sound. What is that sound?
It stopped.
There, it stopped. Okay. Okay.
Here we are, huh?
Here we are. Thank you so much. I just have to say thank you to every and all entities that made this this moment possible, the moments that we just passed and the moments that are to come before us. I want to welcome our collective ancestors into the space and give our thanks to them for our capacity to be here together today. My name is Onye Ozuzu, and I'm here grateful to New York Live Arts, grateful to Qudus, grateful to University of Florida and the Center for Art, Migration, and Entrepreneurship for their organizational roles in facilitating our ancestors getting us to this space. And I am here to welcome Bill T. Jones, living legend of contemporary dance of our times, and Qudus Onikeku from Lagos, Nigeria, breaking new ground, legendary in his own right. I'm transitioning from the space that those dancers just took me to bring my feet back on the ground. So these two artists really need no introduction, but I'm going to kick off the conversation by way of just telling a bit of a personal story that links together and weaves together how I know you both. So my Uncle Bill, in 2013, you and I met in the flesh for the first time at the Chicago Humanities Festival. And I was invited to have a conversation with you in that context. And I don't know if you know this, I listened to every word you spoke in an interview that year. I spent 2 weeks steeped in preparation for that conversation. I was shaking in my bones. And we had an amazing conversation that just rolled through the hills. And two things I want to bring forward from that moment. There was a moment in that conversation where you asked me if I could be your uncle. I remember that it made every hair on my body stand up. If I could be your uncle. And it was the midst of a conversation where I was asserting that all the work that you did, the way that you strode into the spaces, the rarefied spaces of high art, white dominated, white articulated spaces, and appropriated the tools of contemporary dance, postmodern dance, and unabashedly, unapologetically use those tools to tell your stories as a complete and whole Black man. The way that you brought Florida and the back roads of Florida onto those stages and told those stories without apology, and fully using the tools that were set apart as if they were somehow different from us. That was core and central to my becoming. And so when you said, can I be your uncle? I said, of course, you're my uncle, of course. And the second thing I want to bring forward from that conversation was, in the midst of that conversation, I asserted also that my seeing that and that catalyzing the contemporary artist within me gave me permission to go off in another direction. I said to you at that time, I said, you gave me permission not to follow in those footsteps. Actually, you gave me the permission to go and look outside of the US, outside of a Europeanist context for the foundation of my voice as a contemporary artist. And you said, okay, I see you. And I was asserting that hip hop, that West African dance forms, that street dance performance all over the Afro diaspora was perfectly appropriate for us to base our contemporary voices upon. And you challenged me in that moment, and various members of the audience who were standing up to assert Chicago and South Side, et cetera, et cetera. You challenged us collectively. You said, okay, fine. But how is it, what is it, how is it that you push rigor? How is it that you push beyond what flows out of you in a vernacular context? How is it that you contextualize what you're saying? And so that challenge flowed through my thinking in the 8 years since. And one of the tributaries of that thinking and those conversations led me to meet my little big brother, Qudus Onikeku. We originally met on Facebook. Like most good Nigerian relationships start with very, very beautiful arguments. And Qudus and I entered into conversation in a digital context, and eventually he invited me back to my homeland and back to Nigeria. And this work, Reincarnation, and Qudus Onikeku and his work as an artist, Nigerian artist who went to Paris and then turned on his heel and returned back to Nigeria, in some ways is one of my answers to your question. Qudus and his work and this particular work, Reincarnation, I submit. I submit as a continuation of our conversation. My Uncle Bill, meet my brother Qudus.
So done. Beautifully. Beautiful, beautiful. So I'm going to jump in and say, first of all, I am really moved by this moment. And I also am taken somewhere else. I would say you'll have to excuse me. I'm not sure. I was trying to take notes during that powerful panel before and even here. And so if I sound like I'm trying to interview, it is because by the questions I'm asking are on a way trying to ask my brother, I guess if he's your brother, he's then my nephew, right? What was going on? What are you doing? What were you doing when you made it? And there was a very powerful discussion about entrepreneurship today. And that is really, really like, I'm listening to that at New York Live Arts. We're trying to understand how we move, and that's a big we. I'm not even sure if there's a we anymore, really. I used to think we shall overcome all that stuff they fed us in the 60s. That was, do I still believe there's a we? After what we know about systemic racism, after we know about how we have been stripped and set apart, do I believe I'm part of a public realm that is multicultural, multiracial? Although, is there a we? When I see community in your work, what I just saw, I said, if Bill T. Jones, he would be a different person if he was the age of some of those performers developing a sensibility when he was surrounded by bodies that looked like him, that he was not subjected to the criticism through the modernist lens. I was trying to shape that personality that you so generously described, telling stories, being outrageous, being Black, being trying to be in a world where everyone thought that the highest art was neutral. They were telling themselves that, right? Ballet is neutral. Cunningham is neutral. Trisha Brown is neutral. And Mr. Ailey, well, Mr. Ailey is, it's the Black Americans. They make a very beautiful thing, and it's a compliment to us as Americans that we can, quote, promote and tolerate this and send it around the world. But I'm thinking, is that still the same thing as the support that you give and the love that you have for New York City Ballet? Okay, so when I talk to you today, I'm trying to find my way out of a certain frame of mind, and I'm trying to understand how to lead, because I am a leader, into the future. And is there a we? Is there a we? Do I dare believe there's a we? I was at Woodstock at age 17. I was dropping LSD. I was dancing naked, high, and we were not our bodies. We were not our bodies. The counterculture was supposed to have escaped from identification with race. I don't know if they got around to gender. They didn't. There was no question of gender. So I thought, oh, I'm like Jimi Hendrix. I'm in the mix. I'm just like another cool freak, as we said. But now there's a lot of stuff going on that experience did not allow me to be privy to, but I did get raised in the art avant-garde. So today when I come to your work, the first thing I might ask Q, I'll stay with Q, is how does this work that I just saw that was done by Centre Pompidou, right? How did it come to be? Because I know you're very concerned about who owns what image, what platform is it on? So how did it happen?
Oh, wow. First of all, I just want to say a huge thank you to all the forces that made this happen. This is so epic for me. I'm here sitting down in my home in Lagos, and I'm in New York at the same time. It's those who know me know this is the kind of thing I love. Like, how do we eliminate distance, and how do we eliminate all the barriers that is in between all our conversations? And I feel like when you even talking about the whole idea of we, that's what has been the uh, blocking point for the realization of we, because we all have been co-opted into some other people's gains, that we stop looking at our own gains. And I schooled in France. I spent my 10, 12 years trying to find my way back to Nigeria. And when eventually, at that same year you're talking about, Onye, 2013, I was invited to be part of Festival d'Avignon, like the main, stage in Europe. And I was 29. And after that was done, that was the third work I was going to make after schooling. And this was when they were already making me the new choreographic talent in France. Like, there was a lot of flowers being thrown up everywhere. We're having 3 years funding, and everything was. Then you go on tour, and people in Brazil say the Franco-Nigerian choreographer, and you're still struggling for your 1 year resident permit. And I was like, I think where the work is, there is always a dichotomy between the work and what is said about the work and how the work is received, especially when we exist within a context where we have to constantly produce, translate, subtitle ourselves at the same time, where we have to explain our work as we are making it. And it's a very huge amount of energy that is required already in understanding what the work is. Then there is double amount of energy in trying to protect the work in terms of languaging. What kinds of language do you put around the work, like a kind of a firewall, like an antivirus that you yourself produce with the work, so that when they bring in all their virus, there is already something covering it. And you needed to be engaged in that work. And I thought it was, after Avignon, I thought, this is too much energy. I don't want to waste that energy. I'm still very young, and I want to make things. I thought I was a maker more than a commentator. So since I don't want to be involved in this work of constantly commenting about my work in order to protect it, I needed to be in a space where I need no explanation, where I need no introduction before we can start the work, where I need no contextualization after making the work. So coming back to Nigeria was a deliberate action that is connected to the work. I realized that I needed to change the ground where the work is being made. And this was me who had to return 2 years of funding. Like, say, your funding, I think, is one of my problems. Because your funding has an expectation. Your funding, in the way at which it's structured, it's not going to help in the realization of any great art. And I say that with all sense of humility. In the last 30 years, nothing really great has ever come from France, even though France has spent so much money in the arts like no other country. So I'm saying there is a problem between the funding and the work, because the funding is beginning to cripple the work. Because for you to make the work done, then you need to have this partner, you need to have that partner, then you need to have 10 shows already sold, then you need to be on tour consistently for you to get the funding next year. So I realized that the cycle of funding was already detrimental to the work. So I needed to take myself out of that kind of economic existence. Secondly, I'll give you a very tricky example. There was a particular dancer that came for the audition of one of our works. And when we gave him the contract of how much he will earn from being part of that work, then he came back and said, because of the unemployment, I don't know, whatever you call it, like if you don't work, the government pays you, those kind of deal in France. Because the amount of money the government will pay him if he doesn't work is equivalent to the amount of money we want to pay him. It chose not to work. And I was like, what? I couldn't believe my eyes. This is an artist. This is an artist. And that's the space we existed in France. So I said, the bodies, the hunger, the zeal I needed, I don't even find it in the bodies here. The kinds of pain, the kinds of trauma, the kinds of memories I need in the bodies, I can't even find it in France. So I needed to shift my base back to Nigeria for economic reason, for body memory reason, for aesthetic reason, for liberty reason, freedom, for also discourse reason. There are so many reasons that made me say, you know what, I'm going back to Nigeria. And when we got to Nigeria, I knew that I was in a space where we are 211 million people, or let me rephrase, the 200 million Black people who doesn't even know that they're Black because they never identify one another as Black. We might be Yoruba, we might be Igbo, we might be Hausa, Fulani, and 250 other tribes living here. But Black is something you discover when you leave Nigeria. That, oh, actually, I'm Black. I didn't know. The irony of it is that this is actually the pot of Blackness. If you want to know what Blackness look like without whiteness inside it, come to Nigeria. If you want to know how Black people tell their stories, watch Nollywood. If you want to see how Black people dance, go to Africa. I'm talking about a Blackness that is not explaining itself, that is not just opposing itself, that is not centralizing whiteness as something I'm speaking to or speaking against. It's just is. I say Black is beautiful. In Nigeria, we say Black is.
So you're saying
Period.
It's much easier to have a we. It was easier for you. The we question was not an issue. There was a we. All right.
And what I think
that
I'm
is
also hearing you say, Qudus, is that the decision to go back to Lagos, it set the platform in all of those ways that you describe for the answer to Bill's question, which is how did that work, reincarnation, get made? I think that in a way you answered the question by saying, I left France, I went back home, and then I steeped myself in the liberation and the bodies and the language and the potentiality of that we.
And the people of the trumpet, what I'm trying to get at is French money made the tape I just saw, right? French, probably white, maybe I'm wrong, white French intellectuals said, this is a brilliant work. We should film it in this way, and our name is on it, right? And now we have it in New York, and the first thing we see is the Pompidou Center, which, I have respect for them. So was that in itself free of the pain and discomfort and compromise that you had felt as a dancing body, choreographing body in France? You came in triumphant with a wonderful work, and they put it on a platform. Was that comfortable, negotiating the language and so on?
Because we live in a very we live in a new world, and I have a feeling that this work was actually one of the few things people saw in France post-COVID. Like literally, when we made this work in Paris in January, there were only two pieces happening in France that day or that period: Reincarnation and another work by Boris Shamat. That's all. So, so in a way, everything was new. Even the conversation about, because there was no audience, because we came for a tour. Then the day we were arriving, there was a new announcement of another lockdown. So the question was, what do we do, Q? Should we cancel it, or should we all the way still make you guys come, but instead of going on a tour, we put all our resources in making sure that the film is being premiered and we can film it. Then a month later, we can do a digital premiere for people to at least see it. So this is not just a job of let's just take what's on the market. This is a conversation that has started since last year, because the actual premiere of the piece was supposed to be at the Biennale de Lyon. There was no conversation about digital anything. It was to be part of a tour. When all of that got cancelled, Pompidou, being a part of the co-producers, were interested in anything we were able to come up with as a solution to that. So it's not about the film. We didn't make a film. We made a piece for touring. Then this was an institution saying, you know what, we will be interested in going this route with you, knowing fully well that we're not going to make any money from it. Because when we put it in digital space, people are going to watch it for free. But hopefully you come back in June, which we're going on tour now, then we can have an actual live performance of the piece. So the question you were asking is, how comfortable does that feel, knowing that Pompidou is the first image you saw? It doesn't feel comfortable at all. At all. And they are aware of it. But they brought out the 10,000 euros to make that video. So I said, okay, maybe that's the compromise. But now we're going back on tour, and we've organized our own crew to film our own technical rehearsal, which is going to be the next film that is going to have Afropolis presents Reincarnation. Because they don't even have the right to show this film. They don't have the right to show it at all. It's only for their archive. I am the only one who has the right to show it.
You're a very empowered artist, empowered maker, and I really applaud you, and I'm trying to learn from you. The conversation prior to the screening, I think my collaborator, Janet Wong, was asking the question about capitalism. And if you find these conversations too mucky and we can't fly, but so in other words, I'm hearing that there is a time, you, Onye, said capitalism was the rash on the body, the entity's body. The entity is, I'm assuming, Black people or Nigerian people.
Oh, I would say humanity.
Okay. Okay. So that's the we. That's the we. Because I thought it was we associate capitalism with colonialism, right? And you're saying that's inaccurate. I think that maybe I've learned in both these last events that you're not really at odds with the act of trading your sweat, your spiritual energy for money. You're not, and that money is going to be making a profit for someone. These are languages of capitalism. So you're all right with that to a certain degree. But because I think I find sometimes when I hear this about who is the entrepreneurship, who's going to benefit and all, I think everybody wants to be a capitalist. Everybody wants to make $1 million or $1 million naira. Lyra, well, am I wrong about that? Is that not true that you still desire to make a profit, to bring the cash, you said, bring the cash back to Nigeria? I think I used.
For me, let me quickly jump in that. Um, because we live within a context where there are 62% of Nigerians are below 25, like I said, and 80% of that population are unemployed and underengaged. They're not unemployed because they wish to be unemployed. They are unemployed because of the conditions within which we live. So there is a concrete problem that lack of money creates in in my own context. So the more money I can get, the more money that can be reduced from that 80%, the more people that can be safeguarded from that 80% of unemployment and poverty. So if we live in a context whereby you dig the floor, you see diamond, you see gold, you see oil, you see coltan, you see all the natural resources that the entirety of humanity is picking from. That's below the surface. I'm also talking about above the surface of the ground. You see all the dances, the music, the cultural aesthetics, the fashion, where everybody is picking from. I think it's really normal, without even asking for it, that the owners of this amount of wealth, being it human resources or natural resources, shouldn't be at the bottom of human wealth. It shouldn't be at the bottom of poverty line. It's not, I'm talking about justice here. I'm not talking even economics anymore. I'm talking about what is right. That's all.
And this is very touching that you believe that in what is right. One thing that has happened to me is that, quite frankly, I look around and I see I have to fight for a sense of justice. There is yesterday I was on a call that I do weekly. It's a reading group of the great philologist Hannah Arendt, great thinker. I mean, she's maddening around certain things that she didn't know, but there's this, the last thing in the discussion, or at least before I left, she calls her project Amor Mundi, love of the world, right? And there was a man trying to resolve something she said in an essay with this concept. And I jumped in and I said, I'm reading now a major critic, a writer at New York Times, David Brooks, saying that we've gone too far with wokeness. We've gone too far with critical race theory, intersectionality, the patriarchy. We've gone too far. And now the left, I think he's implying that there's become a new kind of tyranny and so on. You can't say certain things, you get canceled. And I was left really upset because what does he want me to go back to? And that comes back to this question: what do I really love? Do I really love the world? Because it's a very big and fractured thing in the place that I try to live. And I'm hearing you when you say justice, you have a sense that there is something that should be. And I'm not convinced that anything should be. You see how children are killed and raped every day, how people are starved and so on. So that's unnatural. That's an aberration. That should not be. No, that's that's where we become political, don't we? Because I think that might has right. That's what I've been taught in the world. I'd like to unlearn that. Might has right. What do you think about that? Do you believe there's such a thing as justice as opposed to power?
I think can I jump for a second, Qudus? Is that okay? Because
Sure.
I think that there's something in Ifa, in Yoruba divinity, and in the spiritual precepts, from what I understand of them, and Qudus can go deeper around what you said before around it being okay to pay for the expression of artistry and spirituality, that it's okay that that should be somewhat transactional. When you go to a priest of Ifa and you get your reading and it is read that there are certain rituals that need to be produced, the very first thing you have to do is go find money in order to pay for those rituals to be practiced. It doesn't mean that you are exchanging, that the blessing that you're going to receive is something that you can literally buy. It means that you have to give to get. So for Sanch Pompidou to put out 10,000 or 100,000 or a million or whatever they put out is an opportunity for them to be in a position in order to potentially be able to receive in terms of how our ancestors would talk about the flow of energy. So for me, money is a symbol. It's a symbol, like a mask is a symbol, like a dancer's body is a symbol. It's a symbol of value. Love is a value. And money is a symbol of movement. So when money flows, when you take money out of your pocket, it allows for a flow. It symbolically shows off the trails of movement. So, I'm asserting what I perceive to be an Africanist orientation towards that flow of money, that it doesn't necessarily, this is not an either or. If money flows for a performance, it doesn't necessarily mean that the spirituality of that performance is negated. And these terrible things happen in the world. Terrible things happen, like rashes, inflame, and a body, an inflammation taken to an extent can eat up a body. A man dies of cancer. Mm-hmm. But those imbalances they are symptoms of our collective state of flow or lack of flow. So the economic part of our spiritual work is not antithetical to the ultimate point. I don't know whether I agree with Qudus that it's about justice. Justice may be a methodology on the way, but where we're going is a sense of flow, a place where we can feel the winds of reincarnation, that circulation of energy, I believe, is what we are working towards and for.
But now, Onye, Q, I'd like you to get back in, but I just want to say what the lesson that has been taught to me at being a professional artist for 40 years is what you do and its value really has nothing to do with the marketplace. And that's what your challenge is. See, I was taught that you make a masterpiece and the world never recognizes it until you're dead 200 years later. I said that spiritual expression, which we call the work of art, we like to think that it has a connection to a marketplace. But we as artists should always resist that. Well, that's what I was taught. But I'm now trying to understand, to get real, to grow up, that yes, there is a relationship between that thing that is made and how it finds its place in the world and how it becomes a commodity. Q, you were going to say something?
I mean, it's not really about, it's not really, I come back to the question of justice and injustice. It's very important for me, especially coming from the lineage of Fela Kuti, of Wole Soyinka, and the kinds of artists that saw me grow up. We cannot be conceptual about money. When you drive by Lagos and you see people dying just because they can afford $1 a day, that's not conceptual for me. That's real. And this is where we live. Mm-hmm. This is where we live. This is the context within which I make work. I cannot be in a conversation with middle class or high class people who, for them, my art is just another flavor. It's just, oh, have you seen that guy? Another flavor, another taste, you know. And that's not where I'm coming from. I'm not coming to be part of an existing conversation. I am coming because there is an actual work. I see that art and society can merge, that artists can be useful in solving actual problems, not conceptual problems, not aesthetics problem, but problem of poverty, problem of war. That is the kind of context I'm coming from. And it's not abstract at all.
Okay, but do you
It
think
is.
that there are artists who do not want to deal with, W.E.B. Du Bois, right? I was just hearing one of the Afro futurist illustrators, I think it was Miss Robinson in I believe in Detroit, and he reminded us that Du Bois had said that he wasn't interested in any work that was not propaganda, and he said
Yeah.
yeah, but then what about art for art's sake? And I know we. What about the art that is in the mind and in the heart, a language that people have to learn to understand? I value that art as well.
The West has nothing to teach me about art for art's sake, especially when you know what ritual art is about, especially when you know what abstraction is about, especially when you know that people can dance for water, people can dance for the mountains. You cannot tell me about art for art's sake when you still don't even understand what it means to dance without an audience.
You don't
When
get me
you still
wrong. I was saying he
No, I'm
wasn't.
not. I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm saying the mindset that framed that even concept of art for art's sake has nothing to teach me about art for art's sake because we know it. We know it intricately. When
But what do
you
you
have
think about when he
reincarnation,
says about propaganda? Art that is
no,
there. What do you think about propaganda? That art
that's
should
not.
be propaganda. That's what
That
No,
he
it
that's
should.
not.
it
That's
should
not
be.
art. No, no, no. That's not art for me. That's PR. That's something else.
So what
Public
is art
relation.
for you? Q. What
Yeah.
is
No,
art for you?
that's not the point. It's not about definition. I don't work with definition. I work with making. I'm a maker. I am in the art of the thing. When I make it, it's now up to those who are the definers of things to decide if it's art or not. I don't care about that language. I care about what we're doing within the community, how we connect to the ancestors, how we connect to where we want to go, how we connect to our destiny. This is real work for me. It's not a show.
And I think that's fair. That's fair. I just saw that we have a
We
little.
have 5 minutes. Can I ask a last question,
Yeah.
Uncle? Yeah, I want to bring us back to the moment that we were in when we first started this conversation, right in the wake of reincarnation, of seeing the work, reincarnation. And our audience gathered here today, listening to the conversation, also went on that journey with us. And I think all of us, I feel like I'm channeling many of us. I want to know, Bill, I want to know, I want to hear you talk about the experience you had watching that piece. What do you remember? What did you experience?
I did because I cannot get away from the fact that I am watching myself watch all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching it as an anthropologist,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to say, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
This is that couple they're probably dancing a folk tale. They're probably dancing a story, a myth. And well, can you look at it as just abstraction, as free of any cultural connotation? And I could not. Literally, the way people's bodies move, I was thinking, imagine a world where nobody has any trace of having been in a ballet class. Or that the movement is so free in its reference to functions like sex and all those things. Imagine a society where people did not think there was high and low art. Now, I'm doing all this as I'm watching it work and having an experience, but I cannot hear. My mind has been shaped a certain way to look at art. Now, there's another thing about making it and actually living in life. But when I look at a work of art, those are the questions I ask. There was also the question of, as I told you the other day when we were doing the prep call, in my space years ago when we first merged, there was a company from Angola, at least a choreographer, and they were making a very peculiar work. It didn't have a lot of dance value, but it had very strong images. And I remember him saying something to the effect, the choreographer, that I believe people are always interested in the sweat of African bodies. But he says, I want people to be interested in what we're thinking. Therefore, I'm not going to give them the sweat of Africa. It's an African choreographer who was doing, trans theater in a way. He said, no, people want us to see the sweat of our bodies, but what are we thinking? Well, as I was watching it, I was thinking that, and the way people are using their faces, the way people are very, very, they're winning performers. They know how to seduce an audience. They make us fall in love with them, or you make them. It is extremely accessible. And there are places where it goes into another plane, but it is designed to win, designed to connect with me. And I'm thinking, does everybody watching this deserve to be made a part of your community like that? That we can watch these beautiful, sexy bodies give to us as if we are one of them. And I guess that's what the question of justice and that's what the question of trade is all about, which takes us full circle. But that's what was going on with me, watching myself watch and watching it as an anthropologist and a critic.
That's the point. I think that's the ultimate. That's the ultimate, because unlike the wave of choreographers went back to the continent in the early 2000s or 90s, whose primary interest was to go back to the continent and make a work from Africa. I'm not making my work from Africa. I'm making my work in Lagos. I am not thinking about a foreign audience when I make my work. I centralize myself, my people, my audience, and this is the way we groove in Lagos. Now, if you want an access to that, you better keep your critic eyeglass at home, or else you miss the entire point. That's what I tell to my European and American audience.
So we all have to understand how to watch it as somebody down the block from your theater in Lagos would watch it.
Precisely. My positionality for the audience, the positionality I put the audience is to put them in a bus driving around Lagos. That's it.
Well, good for you, because I feel like audiences owe you nothing. And a lot of their audiences are there to actually put you in a historical context. They come with their own means watching what you do. You cannot, that's very good. I know I can think of some people, she who shall not be named, from the New Yorker, who watching it, they're not there to be charmed. They're not there to become a person in Lagos. They see themselves as being custodians of a history of discourse around what you're doing. And you can either accept it or not, but they get usually, that's what people are writing. Thousands of people will read what those people say about what you do.
Then millions of people see what we do on Instagram and on Facebook and on Afropolis. We are shifting the power from those kinds of gatekeepers into the hands of the millions of followers. This is what we're talking about. I am not making it work to seduce them in any way. They have to leave their own high horses and come and realize what is really happening in the now.
All right. We did it. We did it.
We did. I love the work. It's a great honor to know you. I hope we can continue this discussion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you both so much. Thank you both so much. We're out.
We're out.
Thank you.